Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the CVRcade talk show. My name is Jesper Anchor, and for the last 15, 14 episodes, well, Beth has been here for every single one of them because she shows up on
Yeah,
time. Victor has been slacking for a few of them, so he's making up with it by doing the late Song
thanks.
T live streams, Vic. So we forgive you, but we thank you also for your contribution of streaming at 3 a.m. in the morning. But since last week, a lot has happened, guys. Like, there are so many topics that we can discuss here because, first of all, the World Cup has been announced. It's season 2, starts February 15th. So 16 days, 17 days from now, it begins the day after Valentine's Day. That's going to be exciting. Team Hive have now been officially declared. They have their jersey shown to the world, which, spoiler alert, I think is probably the best kit in the game right now. And there's many other things. But first, guys, and especially you, Beth, you made a post, Beth, on CVRcade Riders that had like 20 reactions. It was about you, Kayla, Vibeke, Jennifer, so on. What was that post about?
Yeah, well, it's funny because for a while now, I've felt like writing a post because, particularly in my own team, we have, we're a co-ed team. Velocity's always been a co-ed team. Always wanted to race as a co-ed team. The platform really speaks to men and women racing together because of the equalization. And as the last few months have transpired, we've seen more women come into the platform, and I think that they're seeing it as an approachable place, a welcoming place, and and I was like, how can I call it girl power when we're really people power, right? Like, so that was kind of like the name of my post. Like, I feel so weird being like, yeah, women, come on, this is great, you go, girl, because like that's not really the vibe of CB Arcade. We're equal, and I think sometimes people can confuse that, like when a woman says girl power, we're not saying we want more, we're just saying we want the same opportunities. And so it was really kind of a celebration post for everybody who's bringing their best to the game, every single person who's pushing, so that we have some really good competition. And but overriding that was some really excitement for Vibeke, who we've been seeing work so hard, right? And she's been battling against Tim, who's a monster. And then to see over the months Jennifer Garcia come up and battle and make waves and be a contender. It's just exciting to me to see these opportunities being realized. You still have to be fit, you still have to put in the effort, but it just made me really, really happy. So I'll temper my enthusiasm, but that's where it comes from.
So you say it's equal, and it is, but I mean, when you see how Jennifer dominated on Thursday and Saturday, and how Vibeke as well winning a zone, like it looks. So this is how it looks, at least from a commentating point of view. The guys, they come in, they pick it up a bit quicker than the girls do. They come in and they quicker get into it, like Louise, like Casey, like Tim. But over time, like the girls, they once they get it, they're so scary because someone like Vibeke, when she crashed yesterday in the head-to-head racing on Saturn, she's like, "No, I've never
Yeah,
seen somebody."
and I crashed on mountain bike by Jesper. I was like right there in the front, and I was like, oh, so there was no getting
Man.
back.
But to have that grit to come on through, I think it's exciting. I think it's awesome to see. But Vic, the efforts that Jennifer produced on Thursday and on Saturday. She won an Omnium on Thursday. She almost did a back-to-back Omnium win. And on Saturday, she won another one in front of her dad, Frank Garcia. What do you attribute like Jennifer's success to here? And what do you think of some of the comments that were made, like she's having a breakout performance? Casey was saying that he's pushing everything, but he can't follow. What do you think of that?
Um, yeah, it's interesting to see how she's always been quite consistent, but she kind of just went up a notch. And I think you always have, like with your fitness, is you're gonna hit like a plateau, and then when you eventually go over that step, it's kind of like a ladder. You will gain more power quite quickly. I think that is probably, I think what has happened is she had like this step, like she moved up the ladder, plus she also now has clipless pedals, so she's clipped in. And I also think she is learning how to use the gears, because if you look before, she used to spin like, before when she had like 0 gear, she used to spin super high cadence. But then when she got gears, I don't know, I think she just forgot that you can actually switch. So she was doing like super low cadence, which isn't really efficient. But now we can see her actually spin. So I think all of these factors coming together has made her just become a better cyclist and a better CVRcader. So yeah, it's really funny because I remember on one of the Lakeview courses, and we were like, me and Jesper, like he was commenting, I was just looking like, he's just doing 800 watts forever. So that it was really interesting to see. And I mean, I get the comments from like Casey and Tim, etc., because it's quite like tough when you're pushing all these watts or whatever. But I think the issue is that Jennifer, for example, isn't pushing that many watts, like absolute power, which we don't talk about a lot in CVRcade, but she might be doing lower, which means if she bumps up a tiny bit, that percentage is going to be, easier for her to increase. So we'll see if she can keep it up. I mean, I will struggle to see her do as well as she's done in a few Omniums in the past now, but it's still exciting to see.
What she did on Subvert Stadium, where I'm like, she crashed. I think
yeah,
she's
when
out.
She crashed,
then she came back. Then I'm like, oh, she crashed again. I think she's out. Then the third time, and Casey goes, I wish I could crash 3 times and win a race. I'd like to have.
I think
whatever.
That's a once in a lifetime.
Yeah, well, I think just sort of zooming out a little bit on it, and and taking sort of like it's the idea that there's someone that's new to the platform, right? And we're going to have a lot of people that are going to be new to the platform, so they have to learn the dynamics and how that works, and they have to go through the equalization process, and we can talk more about that. But then also someone who's new to cycling, right? They have higher learning curves and opportunities for success because they haven't really experienced what it means to go deep. And so they might think they went deep on a race, and they went as deep as they thought they could. But Cade has a way of like making you go deeper than ever before. So we saw that with Kayla, right? New to cycling, new to riding, where it was just sort of like she just kept going deeper. And then her equalization like caught up, and I think she might have overtrained a little bit and got injured. But the thing is that we who have been cycling for a while, our progress is really small. We're like fighting to get 10 more watts in an FTP test, but like when you're new, you're like, holy crap, I've never done this before. What did I get? And that's your baseline. And then you're like, oh, I think I can go harder. So I think that Casey's used to going deep. Tim's used to going deep. I'm used to going deep. I'm not benefiting from those same steep curves of success that I had when I first started cycling. And I'm new enough to the sport to kind of see both sides of that. So I think it's going to be really important as new people who come to the platform and as new cyclists come to, we're going to have people who've never maybe ridden a bike before. They don't know what deep is. You know what I mean? So so that equalization will also adjust for that. And I think that's just something to keep in mind for all of us who really hurt ourselves.
Well, there's somebody like Timothy who's ridden a bike for years. I still don't think he knows what going deep is.
I think I'm going pretty deep recently.
In recent times, now that he's got his own team, yes, I will agree. But I've seen Quinton, Tim, Timothy, Nils, we were all in a meetup in Quinton's area, Maastricht, a few years ago. And we all did a Swift race. Everybody took turns. We live streamed it on Cycling Hub. And Timothy is like, he was talking while at max heart rate. He was like 190. He's like, guys, I can't go harder. I'm at max heart rate. Every single one of us is like, Timothy, if you can talk, you are nowhere near your max heart rate. You should be empty. But everybody's different. That's kind of why.
Yes.
It lays. Like Cameron Jeffers is somebody who I've seen race from the Cycling Hub offices, who I thought like, you're dying, but you can still talk. So it's all different. But I think at the end of the day, how Cade is set up in terms of the racing and the leagues and the World Cup is so clever, because a breakout performance is bound to happen. It's what makes it so fun to see people finally get it. Because for Jennifer, it wasn't just the gears. It wasn't just the motivation. It was that she understood the game. Go slower to go quicker. Don't crash and you win. And so it all came together. But that was just one Omnium. Regardless, she did do it again on Saturday. But a World Cup is 8 to 9 weeks long. An Omnium is 4 events long. To win a grand finale, as we saw in Season 1, you've got to win one race, then another race, then another race, then another race. And that's where, like, don't get caught up in one-off breakout performances, because those that are going to win the most amount of money, those that are going to go on to become stars, are the ones that can consistently produce the same effort again and don't make mistakes. So Vibeke is great. She's come up here. Can she maintain? That's the question. Jennifer's come up here. Can she maintain? And this is why we're in such an exciting time and period of the Cade racing, because we're just like, what, 2 weeks away before season 2 begins? Before, I think it's no secret, cycling up here, then there's a massive like dip down to the second tier teams. But that second tier, like, I would not say they're too far behind. Hive, like, Beth, in the head-to-head racing, what you four as a team did, I don't think anyone expected it. You blew everyone's expectations, and I'm just excited. And I think as people get in, we saw Tom T in the Omnium. We saw a Canadian guy earlier last night as well. They're going to get in. They're going to have breakout performances, but can they do it over time? So as a community, as people on the platform, let's not make snap decisions based off one breakout performance, because that's just not how the platform works. And to tie into that conversation, I don't think we got to discuss this last week, guys, and it's not in our notes. But rider licenses are now in the game. Did we discuss this last week, Beth?
We might have touched on it a little bit, but maybe we didn't kind of dig in.
Did we?
Yeah, I think we talked about it a little bit.
So much happens, I can't remember.
Maybe it was in a dream.
I think we were saying it got slipped in, and we like that day, and we were kind of responding to it. In the meantime, people have asked me, like, how do I move from cadet to competitor? How do I move from competitor to master? Wait a minute, how come I'm a pro? So I think it's worth just sort of reiterating again what those license levels are. So if you want to, someone wants to jump in and get started.
The reason why I bring this up is because I had Ed Laverick, who was in the broadcast yesterday in racing, and he was obviously a cadet, as you could see, because he attacked off the front. He was so happy, only to seconds later to not be so happy when he was down in 5th. So he's asking, how do I progress, Jesper? I'm at 20% in Cade Cadet. How do I become a Cade competitor? And so the ranks are Cade Cadet, Cade Competitor, Cade Master, Cade Pro. There's very, very few people in Pro because you need to have earned X amount of money in the CVRcade World Cup. But Vic, how do you progress from Cade Cadet to Cade Competitor? Because someone like Ed, I think he just assumes you've got to spend 10 minutes on the platform, half an hour on the platform, and it doesn't matter how hard you ride, he thinks, in order to progress.
No, I think that's not necessarily true. I think you need to, I'm sure you do, is to ride replays is what I would recommend. It's always going to be hard as a Cade Cadet to come in to the racing just because of everyone else who is equalized. And we saw that yesterday with him. He was off the front, and then Cade kind of just went the equalization, just like, oh, hold on a minute, you're going a bit, exactly, just pulling him back, which is exactly what it should do. So I would just recommend, like, anyone new, just ride replays. I mean, those are really the perfect way of getting used to what other people do, because you will be able to see all the riders who's raced, and you will be able to try and match their efforts. So yeah, just ride more, just ride hard in the replays, and you will see that progress bar go up, and eventually you'll go from cadet to pro, master, whatever. Eventually, you'll end up in the big leagues. So that would be my pro tip to do.
But now we have a progress bar. Like, in the past, you wouldn't even know. Like, I wouldn't even know if I was a Cade Cadet or a Cade competitor. But now you have a certain thing telling you. Now, for me, I progressed with 2 Omniums. I did a Thursday race and a Saturday race, I think it was, and I was up there. I was fine, and I was a Cade competitor, and I was equalized. But I think the misconception that people are having in terms of progression is that people are so used to Zwift's logic that kilometers equal experience points equals progression. So on Zwift, in order to rank up, you have to just ride your bike. It doesn't matter if you are going at snail pace or at Chris Froome pace. Now, Cade licenses is a very different thing. It's an equalization badge. It's an equalization license. And it has to be confidence that you are given your absolute most in order to rank up. If you are just riding out there and you're pushing 60 watts, it might be thinking that you're holding something back, because the majority of people, unless they're like 5 years and below, they can push more than 60 watts. So get on and ride hard for the first few times, because the harder you ride initially, the easier it gets over time, and you can sit in.
And I would say too, make sure that you wear your heart rate when you do that, because the game is also measuring your heart rate. It's not just your power. So if I was like sitting there and doing, like some max effort and my heart rate wasn't on, the computer it doesn't know, right? So, if I'm at, 175 of my actual heart rate, that is like a high top number for me. So that would be like 200 in the game. So the game also has to say, oh, wait, when Beth is at 175, it makes sense that her watts would be this. So there's a math and an analytic engine under it, but that is really what it's saying. It's getting the confidence and the consistency of like, hey, when her heart rate is way here, this is the corresponding watts that. And yesterday I think you saw in New York City after that time trial, I'm detrained. I had the power for like 15 minutes and then I had nothing, but my heart rate was still like so it's remembering all of those things that I'd like to forget, but it's important to wear your heart rate too during that.
Yesterday was fun. Like, I have campaigned very, very hard for head-to-head. Like, I reached out to you, Beth. I reached out to Timothy. I set up the head-to-head test that we did yesterday. And from my perspective on that one, it was a tale of two halves. The first half was kind of like, this is somewhat failing. I'm not sure this is going to work out, because the second half was saved when FOG in the chat suddenly started doing the math. And we're like, oh my goodness, there's 2.5 points in between because Carl is not wearing a heart rate strap. So I think yesterday I severely loved how it panned out. I think seeing Nigel push harder than he's ever done before, Vibeke, you, Beth, I think it was good. But Beth, as a racer yesterday, how did you enjoy the head-to-head test? Because it's a totally different way of racing.
Yeah, let me tell you, I knew it was going to be fun, and we've tried to have 2 or 3 racers in to always work on something in each of the omniums. We try to inspire teamwork, and I think that we do on a lot of things, but we do it race to race. We're like, oh, I'm feeling good on this one, so okay, well then Car Axle will work for you on this race, but we're not looking across the whole omnium necessarily. We're trying to get everybody as high as we can. But knowing that our scores were going to be accumulated together, and knowing that it just in the cooperation, I mean, in talking and having conversation, it just, the whole tenor of what was going on in the team car was so engaging, and to the degree of like, I'm moving right. Oh crap! It's the other corner I want to be on, because we were trialing on the front on the city, and that one particularly, like, we wanted to maximize the draft. We wanted to get the speed up, and we were testing a lot of things ourselves too. So the experimentation, the engagement level, I mean, the hour flew by. If like my legs and my heart would have done it, I would have like kept on racing, because we all left that like, oh, that was the most fun ever. And it really had to do with our cooperation and engagement level, and watching the dynamics of a team really come into play. So we had a great time, and it was awesome that Team Hive, came out, and the drama that unfolded in terms of like how close it was, and super fun.
Vic, what did you think?
Yeah, it was definitely it was different to the normal racing, which I definitely think is good, because we do all the individual stuff and it's quite like monotonous with the same type of racing all the time. Still great, but it was nice to switch it up. Yeah, I thought it was good racing. It's interesting to know, like, we've done one test. I think we definitely need to do more. Like this Omnium yesterday worked quite well, I would say, as a head-to-head. But we don't know how well it would work in a different type of Omnium. But I think the biggest takeaway was probably on Cityscape with that attack from Vixen. I thought that was really clever. And we also saw Wim Moisen in CVRcade Riders, who mentioned the hammer chase, which is this like time trial thing that the Hammer series does. And it was quite interesting, because it is quite similar. And I thought the team play did work out quite well. It would be interesting to know if we tested maybe like 3 riders or 5 riders to see if there's any difference there. But I think the test was still a success, and I would definitely say that like we definitely need a scoreboard for the team, because as you mentioned before, Jesper, like but before FOG in the chat said like, oh, there's 2 points, it was quite like you don't really know, you can just assume. So get that in the game, and I think it's going to be really, really fun and interesting
But
as a World Cup.
now we also look at the aftermath. On Facebook, we posted the highlights of both K and L. Now, K had 15 reactions, no comments. L, which was the head-to-head test, has 32 reactions, which for CVRcade on Facebook, like that
That's
is
a lot.
so much.
Yeah.
And it has 7 comments as well. It has 2 shares. It's like, what? People just seem to get this. People seem to understand.
Yep.
Purest form, team versus team. I like this team. I hate this team. I want this team to win. I can watch this because the downfall of what we've seen so much is that, like, it gets a bit muddled when you have 20 racers in there, 30 racers in there. Some are racing together, some aren't. Like what Beth, you said earlier, that you're finally figured out how to work together because you've been forced to. That's kind of what we saw. Like, you guys, well-oiled machine, you were just in sync. But if we see that in an all-up racing, it's just a bit different because somebody's always going to be a bit egotistical. Someone's always going to think, well, I don't want to lose face. I want to be sub 6. I want to be interviewed by Jesper. I want to be on the stream. But when it's a team dynamic, it doesn't matter. Like, you're going to get interviewed. You're going to be shown up. I think it is just so amazing.
Points are points, right? Like points
Yeah.
are points. Like that's the thing. Like and it really kind of takes that mindset of like, doesn't matter. And even on the third, the third or fourth position, because maybe I'm fourth position on a race and I need to get those extra points and I just need to pass Ben. There's one race where I was like, oh shoot, like Ben's like 3 seconds up there, and like, should I save myself for the next race? This was on mountain bike course by Jesper. So I'm already thinking like, all right, I crashed. I'm not going to be at the front. I'm not going to get max points. It's a 2.5 multiplier. And this is where the scoreboard would have been good, because when Ben passed me, I would have seen immediately what I was losing by letting him pass. And I probably would have like dug a little harder. But at that point I was like, well, I've got Saturn coming up and I don't know. I don't want legs. I'm going to have back. So like I could have held maybe more points on in that 2.5 multiplier versus maybe dialing it back and trying to think I might have something more for Saturn. So it gets deep on the like mental part of it. And that's part of the fun, right? Because you're doing that thought process and communicating with your team about what you're going to be doing now and in the next race.
And the blocking. Who would have thought Vibeke Bertram, like Vibeke, lovely Vibeke, I'm so sorry that I saw you post on your Facebook that your nickname was the chicken after I called you a beast. I thought that was going to be public knowledge once you posted like online on Facebook. Sorry, I can't take it back. Take my forgiveness or ask for forgiveness. But seeing Vibeke put a block on Jennifer, that would never happen otherwise. Like, it was so many storylines. Everyone was just giving it all, and I think I'd like seeing it. But Vic, I think to your comment about testing 3 riders versus 5 riders, what do you think the difference would be? Because when I run it through my head, I don't think the number of riders each team brings would change the dynamics that much.
No, probably not. But it's always good to test. I was also thinking, because I remember, Jesper, you said that New York felt a bit long as a race, so that might be as well as a test, because we always do 4 races. Like, the Omniums look quite similar. You kind of know what you're expecting. So maybe for like the team league, we might have like 5 races instead, but they're a bit shorter. Now, I didn't race myself, but it'd be really interesting, Beth, if you thought, like, was the race too long, or was it like, how did you feel about the length of, especially New York, because that was the long one of yesterday.
Yeah, and we were talking about that. I think the New York race was we did do it like a team time trial, and there was Uncrashable on, so it kind of spoke to sort of my wheelhouse of just maybe not having as high of skill as some of the other riders, but being able to suffer. And then so I think that I still like the mix of Omniums. I do think having one longer event does sort of test that engine part, right? So if you're testing skill, you're testing engine, but I don't disagree that it might be fun to have maybe shorten that one up and add another one, because that was, you leave a party at midnight and you want to be there till 2 a.m. But if you stay till 2 a.m., you're like, why did I stay so long? So it's finding that right balance of like nothing good happens after midnight, or everything happens between 12 and 1, and that's the best part of the party, right? So maybe adding a little bit more, but not too much. And as far as like adding extra riders, I think what made yesterday work was that I think that both of the teams have riders that are experienced, that have the system does have a confidence in the equalization, and that proved out, right? Because it was sort of like Vibeke and Nigel and Carl Axel were up there, except for when they made mistakes, right? And that's the gameplay, and that's what you would expect to see. And the same thing with Ben crashing, or so I think that like maybe adding a couple extra riders, they might be doing the like clean up block stuff in the back, which I don't necessarily know if that's gonna like help things or not, but I don't know. But I'm all for testing whatever. I'm happy to be a guinea pig, because I had just so much dang fun yesterday. It was great.
I think that's my new favorite saying, by the way. Trying to correlate between adding another rider or whether or not to stay out after midnight. I think, Beth, that right there,
that makes sense.
I was gonna say, you just took a very complicated situation and explained it. How anyone could just be like, we've been in that situation before. I know exactly.
I've been there.
Yep. Mm-hmm. We all
to play devil's advocate, because we've only done the head-to-head, and I'm heavily biased towards this because I have
I'm biased too. I raced it, so maybe I'm the wrong person to ask.
So playing on the other side, because the reason why New York felt so long is because it felt like the skill gap was severely on that course. It was really on display. As a team, Vixen was gelled, Hive was not, and then they did have Kayla on as a last-minute substitute, so she hasn't had that much time racing with them. But the reason it felt long is because when you boil it down, you have one really, really gelled team, one team that struggled. And so over that distance, it just became evident, and that kind of made it a tiny bit boring. So a potential way of disguising this would be to have like a 4-team head-to-head. So you have 4 teams in there and you do 2 heats, 4 versus 4. I don't know. This is where you, the community, need to get involved, because you help shape everything on CVRcade. That's why we're in closed, now in open beta. You guys help. We need your opinions and your feedback. What do you want to see? Like streaming wise, gaming wise, gameplay, team wise. What do you enjoy seeing? Because it starts on February 15th, and I just can't wait. Like, I have one vision in my head of what it's going to look like. Beth has one, Vic has one, Nigel, Frank, Tim, Casey, Quinton. Everybody has a vision, but I think it's only fair if everybody gets theirs out. Now, we have a platform to share ours on, which is unfair, but you guys have CVRcade riders. So please, if you have opinions, do let them be known so we can make sure that everything goes the best way. But I think here at the end, I want to discuss the last hot topic, which is keyboard riders. Like, I think this is something that really came to show in the last week. Glenn, God bless, this guy is amazing. Like, if you ever get to speak to him, smiles, laugh the entire time. Quinton, Timothy, Nigel, Vic. There were some heated discussions about having people in. Like, at some point, Tim was yelling at Nigel to get out of the race.
It was, yeah. It got really... Yeah, that happened. I'm not sure when it was now, but it was a few Omniums back. Yeah, I think we're seeing a really like interesting development when it comes to keyboard versus physical. Not really sure why this revelation is happening now, because I don't think really anything has changed with how it works. But yeah, we saw Quinton has been on, Glenn, as you mentioned, Timothy as well in Zone T. And yeah, it was interesting yesterday in Zone T how, Casey was a bit annoyed about, like the keyboard riders. But then at the end in Saturn, he kind of said thank you to Timothy because he kind of helped him at the end. So I like it. I mean, we have the keyboard riders for a reason. I think they should be involved. And like, I guess it's hard to... I would say definitely in the World Cup they shouldn't win, but that's why we have other things planned. But I definitely think they should be involved in the racing, because I mean we had Quinton on a live stream yesterday, and I think especially for the people on Mixer who are like proper gamers, it was it's a lot more relatable to them to see him like, you know, be on Facebook, Instagram while just holding down the button, just being in the peloton. And I like it. I know from a, you know, rider's perspective, it must be, and it could be, you know, very, very frustrating to, you know, know that this guy or girl, whatever, is just not doing a proper effort. But from my point of view, I really like it. I think they should be involved in the racing, and it helps the dynamic because it's so different. It's so left field, and I feel it should be in. That's my opinion.
Beth?
Yeah, I agree that it shouldn't affect the World Cup unless it's like there's some rules that are set in place about how they're handled, and that's like transparent and people know. But in these run-up races, it's kind of interesting to see how it naturally unfolds, right? You got to let it happen and see how it's played. You know, as a rider, when I look at the list and as I'm commenting, I look at this, oh, they're on keyboard. Okay, that makes sense because, you know, sometimes the if there's an ability on, it kind of obscures the keyboard thing and you can't really quite tell, and you're like, oh my god, they crashed and they're back, you know. So there's some dynamics obviously that you can do in a keyboard that you can't ask of your legs to crash 6 times and then, you know, blast out 367 and power up and catch back up
Unless you're Jennifer.
Unless you're Jennifer.
Yeah,
well, you know what?
That
everybody's going to have their breakout performance, and the game is going to, you know, recognize all of that. But I like where it's headed because when I think about my friends and I think about, you know, like even my kids, you know, they don't want to be sweating humped over handlebars. You know, they might want to ride a little bit and shoot. They might actually have a really good time. I mean, I take my kids to the arcade, and the ones things we're on the motorcycle bikes, and we're leaning and we're riding and we're going through a virtual space, and we have a great time. So I think that, you know, it's part of the game. I like having it in the race. I love being able to talk. I haven't interviewed Quinton when he's been on keyboard, but I've interviewed Timothy when he's on keyboard, and he just gives such valuable information. I think it was Zone T where he had something to attack the middle, and he had this just incredible insight that if anyone was paying attention to that zone, they would be like, oh, damn, that's right. Because his heart rate's down. He's not up here, and he's got this clarity and he's sharing it. So I think there's a lot to be learned for cyclists to actually go be on their keyboard for an Omnium and see what that feels like and have fun and experiment that way.
I think this is also a multi-part answer because yes, it's incredibly frustrating to be attacking solo breakaway and the guy behind you is dragging the group along. He's eating crisp. He's got his Coke there. He's going...
I'll ride that wheel all day long, though. Are you kidding me? If it helps me, but I just want to be brake checked. But
I get it. I get that it's incredibly frustrating, but it's part of the DNA. Like I'll be said, if that was me in a solo attack, well, I would never go in a solo attack. I'm not brave enough to do that. I'll just wait for a sprint. If I was in a solo attack, I'd be pissed too. But then you get off the bike and you realize that was kind of fun. Like you don't get that experience anywhere else. This is ingrained into the DNA of CVRcade. You have. Like, it's access for everybody, because I think a lot of people, they kind of forget this in the heat of the moment, but I really realized this with Glenn. Glenn is Timothy's really good friend. For Christ's sake, he was on CVRcade for Zone T last night, which is 4 a.m. his time, on a keyboard. Crazy. And now, after relentless amount of, like, keyboard races, he's now seriously considering getting a bike, getting a turbo trainer, so that he can be riding with us and riding with Timothy. That is the ultimate feel-good story. This is a guy who came in, who is by no means a cyclist. Came on, just wanted to ride with his friend, then he got hooked. He's like, this is kind of fun. The dynamics of racing a bicycle with power-ups, and there's money, and I can win. This is addicting. This is fun. People can get in and they can be part of it. Like, let's not forget why there's keyboards, why you can do it, because if it was a negative thing, it would never be a thing to begin with. Like, soon, there are going to be Xbox players on a controller having their say on the platform as well. So this is just the beginning. This is where it's headed. And of course, there are going to be rules. There are initiatives coming specifically for keyboard racing that I think, like, I can't wait to see how that pans out. But let's not forget, you spend hours on your keyboard, you can get in. Someone like Nigel has been getting in to have fun. Quinton, it's an access tool, it's an accessibility tool to get on. let's not get caught up in all this drama, all this spice of being like, just go away. What are you doing here? Stop. Like, ride your bike physically, as Sebastian would say. Like, what if you don't want to? What if you still want a CVRcade, but today you just don't want to ride your bike? Let's not.
Or
be
you've
all
done
negative.
3 omniums and you still want to practice. I mean, we have racers that are riding 3 omniums and racing 3 omniums on their bike, and they're having so much fun. They're coming back on keyboards, and I think that stickiness that says a lot about the game. And ask me tomorrow when I get blocked by a keyboard player. I'll have a different opinion, but I know the rules will address that.
Say, like, somebody who will never get on a keyboard is Homer. That guy's just gonna ride until his shirt lies. So I mean, we're gonna
some miles in.
We're gonna see how it all happens. I think it's exciting. I think it's really, really cool where everything is headed. But I think that sums up another podcast episode, everybody. 35 minutes long. Thank you so much if you got all the way to this point. Big things happening. Season 2 is starting on the 15th. I think there are other announcements being made this week that you're going to want to be on the lookout for, because they're going to really, like, you're going to want to keep the next 8 to 10 weeks of your schedule relatively free, because you're going to be wanting to be on CVRcade both Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, because it's just not Saturdays. It's not only Saturdays we're going to be racing. There's more planned for the week of racing, but we'll be back.
One plug. Kayla's going to start doing some classes, so for new riders on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So be on the lookout for that for new riders who want to come in and have some onboarding experience. So I just want to throw that out there.
Vic, you get one free plug here as well at the end.
Well, I don't have a plug nearby. I'm sorry.
He'll just say classes with Kayla Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah, I was going to say. I mean, a
Please,
class
Mike.
with Kayla. I mean, that sounds brilliant. So.
In case you didn't hear it, guys, Classes with Kayla is the plug here at the end. That is our nice sponsor here. So if you use Kayla Classes at checkout, you'll save 20% of your free-to-play pass. Everybody, thank you so much for listening. We'll be back next Wednesday with more podcasting and more talk showing. But until then, we'll see you.